current attempts to explain the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline are ridiculous. Could this be an attempt by the USA to put the blame on Ukraine and thus have a possible exit strategy?
That's a good question and a good theory. There was on Twitter, I guess somebody was interviewing Seymour Hersh when this story broke. And so they were having this interview and he said, "Oh, let me read you the headline." And Cy was just like laughing the whole time. He was just laughing. He's like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my." They didn't really do that, did? Oh my God, oh my, which is true. Oh my God, what the heck were they thinking with this story? There's so many holes in the story, it doesn't even begin to add up. And I mean, have people looked at the pipeline that was constructed? You know, this steel pipeline with 2 inches encased in concrete, etc. Do you have an idea of what kind of explosive charge would be necessary to burst that pipeline? It's a shape charge. It has to be specifically designed to the task and the amount of explosive necessary to do this. I dare anybody out there who doesn't know anything about explosives to try and, without Googling or whatever, just tell me how much explosive do you need and all that stuff. The answer is you don't know because it's a lot. And it has to be configured properly. And you don't just test it that day. It had to be tested elsewhere under similar conditions. This is state sponsored. That's what I'm trying to get at. This is something that only a nation state with sophisticated capabilities could do. And yet they want us to believe that 5 Ukrainian/Russian dissidents went on a Baltic holiday, sailing on a yacht to carry out, you know, this sophisticated attack. There had to be at least 4 devices planted, assuming that the one pipeline that didn't go off, it was a dud. It didn't happen. Or else, what's going on? Why blow up 3? Leave the 4th one on alone. Each one of them requires deep water diving support, which means you're going to need decompression support capability, some way to manage because of the nitrogen imbalance, etc. Was the yacht modified for a decompression chamber? Seymour Hersh writes about the specific requirement to bring in a decompression chamber and modify the ship that went out to deploy this. Was the yacht? Where is that? We don't know. They didn't mention it, so I'm thinking it didn't have it, which means nobody on that yacht went down to the depth necessary to put the explosive on there. They say explosive traces were found on the ship. That's a curious term. As a former inspector who used to go around and swipe buildings for explosive traces, that means we now go and take the swipe, we go to the lab, we get the specific chemical breakdown of that trace. Why is that important? Because the Swedes have said we found explosive traces on the bottom of the ocean next to the places. That's so, gosh, now the Swedes have that. You should be asking the Swedes to cough up their explosive traces and compare it with your explosive traces to see what the similarities are. Now, there will be some differences because the Swedish explosives are traces that occur after the explosion. So you'll have to reverse engineer it from that standpoint, but you'll still be able to find out if it's the exact same explosive. And the thing is, the stuff on the ship should be of such a quality that you might be able to get a tracer in it, find out where it was produced, you know, how it was produced. That's where these stories fall apart. You see, they come up and they say things, but then when people like me come in and start asking the questions, they don't have the answers, which means none of it's true, and none of it is true. Every aspect of that story is fake. It's a lie. Now, here comes the interesting part. Why would you tell the lie? You would tell the lie to shift attention away from the Biden administration, who is panicking, by the way. I can't prove the cause and effect relationship, but Olaf Scholz flies to the White House, is taken away, and has a one-on-one meeting, nobody around, between just him and Biden. That doesn't happen. You remember when Putin, when Trump met with Putin, but he had his translator there, how he was criticized? You know, you only have your translator. Where's your note takers and all that kind of stuff? At least he had a translator there. Biden's meeting with Olaf Scholz and nobody's around. No one. It's just them. What are they talking about? I don't know. But then the next day, the New York Times gets a front page story that's just pure BS about the boat. Biden's in a panic because Seymour Hersh doesn't mess around. Seymour Hersh is onto a story, and the U.S. government's figuring out that Seymour Hersh's source is probably somebody who knows everything. And Seymour has promised to keep writing on this issue. So as this story comes out, as he puts out the next version, the next version, the next version, the Biden administration is going to be boxed into a corner where their guilt in terms of violation of the Constitution is going to be so evident that even this this sleepwalking Congress will be compelled to impeach him. And the Senate can't ignore it. So they put the story out. So now you create plausible deniability. You can say, well, yeah, Seymour Hersh said this, but look, these 5 people, they did diving too. Seymour Hersh said divers went down there, but these guys did diving too. Different kind of diving. One is fictional, the other one's real. But here's the fascinating part of the question. Why finger Ukraine in this? Because look what's happened. Even the Germans had to come out and say, if Ukraine, if it is found to be complicit in this, we have to reevaluate our entire weapons policy towards Ukraine. And I think across the board, people are saying if Ukraine truly did this, we have to reevaluate things. And what you're doing is you're creating an opportunity for countries to ratchet down their weapons support to Ukraine at a time when everybody knows Ukraine's going to lose the war. Everybody knows it. Jan Stoltenberg, the Secretary General, said, we run out of ammunition this summer, and that's it. In a war that's defined by artillery, and one side has a lot of tubes with unlimited ammunition, the other side has fewer tubes, and they're going to run out of ammunition. The fewer tubes, no ammunition side loses. So Ukraine's going to lose this war this summer, no matter what happens. So how do you now that you've boxed yourself into courses, we're going to support Ukraine forever, never back down, double down, do everything, give them weapons, all that stuff. But now they're going to lose. So you're just going to end up looking stupid, create a cover story that implicates Ukraine. And now you can say, I don't know if we want to support these guys anymore. They blew up a critical piece of European security, energy security infrastructure. That's the theory, at least. I've seen the Germans make noise about questioning the provision. We'll see if it resonates, or else, it's just a story that's designed to go nowhere. We'll see. If you haven't been watching what's going on right now, there's massive demonstrations in the Georgian capital of Tbilisi, where the youth of Georgia, together with others, have come out in protest against a decision by the Parliament of Georgia to sign into law legislation that required organizations or entities in Georgia that have received at least 20% of their money from foreign powers to basically they have to register as agents of a foreign power. It's modeled exactly upon the Foreign Agent Registration Act of 1938, I believe, here in the United States, maybe 39. I have to go back and check that last digit. But it's the same law. So here in the United States, we say that if you receive money from a foreign agent to advocate on their behalf or to carry out their policy, you must register as an agent of that nation. But in Georgia, apparently, that law is inconvenient. And the United States, Samantha Power, the director of USAID, Agency for International Development, the State Department official responsible for that area of the world who was touring in Georgia, they've all come out and said that this law threatens democratic society in Georgia. Imagine a law that calls for transparency of foreign funding threatens democratic society in Georgia. And you have to ask yourself, why would that be? Well, the answer is quite clear, because the U.S. Agency for International Development is all about soft power. It's about carrying out a color revolution. Even if we don't want to give it a color, we can call it the invisible revolution. But if you take a look at the 22 current programs that are funded by USAID to the tune of around $40 million a year, they are all about bypassing central authority and creating a bottom-up approach to seizing power. They talk about empowerment of local communities, primarily through things that the Georgians don't want, such as respect for diversity. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that the Georgians are right. In the United States, we have a very liberal approach towards transgenders, towards gays, towards queers, towards LGBTQ, that group, the rainbow group. We basically say, rightfully so, this is America. Everybody has rights. Everybody has rights. And all those rights have to be defended. But there are societies out there that don't belong to America who are much more conservative in their approach. And Georgian society is a very conservative society that isn't necessarily willing to embrace the same progressive approach that we take. So what we do is, rather than respect that, we go in and we create, through funding, grassroots institutions that empower this diverse approach. And then we create election systems that allow them to seize control of the election mechanisms so that they can push their people up to carry out a coup d'etat. That's what it's about in Georgia. We are carrying out a coup against the Georgian government, which we feel has for some time now been leaning towards Russia, not doing what we want. Another thing that we've done in there, and it's curious, we are using social media and digital communication platforms as a way of dominating the information space. If you see the United States talk about creating societal resilience against disinformation, that means basically shutting down everybody who doesn't agree with American policy and only promoting American policy. And so that's what we're doing in Georgia as well. And if it was just the soft revolution, I'd still be pretty angry about it. And if I were Georgian, you should be mad, because that's basically an outside power sticking their nose in the business. But here's the deal. The people that are celebrating this, that are out there demonstrating against this law, they think that the United States and the European Union and NATO care about them, that they want to be part of this great club. You remember Borrell, the foreign policy guy in Europe? He spoke about the European garden. And these people think that they are part of the garden. They think they're carrots or celery or something. They want to be part of the garden. You're not. You're weeds. You're in the jungle, baby. You're not in the garden. You'll never be in the garden. All the United States wants you to do is participate in what we call the crescent of crisis, an arc of instability around Russia. We use that name. Rand Corporation has written studies about this. We don't view Georgia as this nation that we want to be friends with and help them rise up to meet the same standards of living we do. We view you as this point where we can have crises designed to destabilize Russia. And what is it exactly we want them to do right now? Create a second front against Russia to divert Russian military attention away from Ukraine. A second front. So that's why these students are out there shouting, Sukhumi, Sukhumi, Sukhumi. That's the name of the capital of Abkhazia that was taken over by the Abkhazian rebels back in 1993. They're calling it unconquered Georgia, which implies that Georgia needs to go and conquer it. Now, to conquer it, you would have to have a direct military conflict with Russia. The last time Georgia had a direct military conflict with Russia was in August of 2008. It was a 5-day war that did not end well for Georgia. They got beat very badly. Pro hint to all those Georgians out there who have seemed to have forgotten their little lesson in history. You're going to get beat badly. Look at Ukraine. 300,000 dead, $1 trillion+ of infrastructure damage, 20 million people displaced. The nation ceasing to function as a nation state. It took Russia a year to do that. Russia would be able to do that to Georgia in less than a month. Some people say in just a matter of days. Georgia doesn't have that much critical infrastructure. Russia has a lot of cruise missiles that it can spare on Georgia. The Georgian army is 4 brigades. 4 brigades. Each brigade, 3 of the 4 brigades are light infantry brigades. That means that they can't do anything. They're light infantry. If they go up against a Russian armored brigade, they will all die. And they will all die anyways. Even the 1 brigade, the 4th brigade, is a mechanized brigade. But it's not a heavy mechanized brigade. It's sort of a light mechanized brigade. It will die too. The Georgians don't have sufficient military power to defend against Russia, let alone carry out offensive operations against both Abkhazia and Ossetia. So the people saying that they want to open up a second front are saying they want Georgia to commit suicide. Now, let me remind the Georgians what will happen when you commit suicide by opening up the second front. You will forever lose Abkhazia. You've sort of forever lost it already. But I take this personally because that's where my wife was born. That's where my wife was raised. That's where her family lived. They lost their home. They lost everything. She would like at some point in time before she dies to be able to return to Abkhazia, to her homeland, to visit where she was, maybe even to once again reside there on vacation, maybe a retirement home, who knows. She has every right to want that because that's her homeland. She's not a tourist. She's not an outsider who was kicked out. She was born there. She's a Georgian. She's from Abkhazia. Sukhumi is her hometown, and she can't go there right now because of stupid people like the ones who are demonstrating in the square saying stupid things about going to war against Russia, which Georgia will only lose. And when you do that, you will lose Abkhazia forever. It'll be gone forever. South Ossetia, probably already gone forever, but you will guarantee it will be gone forever. But if you think that's where it's going to end, then you haven't taken a look at what Russia's done in Ukraine. What do you think is going to happen to Poti? I know Poti. You don't know about America? Look at a map. Hey, if you don't know about America, then why is your government seeking to have a war in Georgia? You might want to learn something about the country that we're encouraging to go to war against Russia. Learn about a little bit more than Kinkali, Khachapuri, and wine, because that's all we know about Georgia. We don't know anything about it. But Poti is an important seaport. It's where the U.S. Coast Guard has sent some naval ships that we turned into the Georgian Navy. Russia will take Poti, and along with it, Guria. Guria is a province in that area. Connectivity from Abkhazia to Guria goes down to a place called Ajaria. Now we're talking about the entire Black Sea coast. Georgia's going to lose the entire Black Sea coast because Ajaria is Muslim. And under the Kars Treaty, Article 6, back in 1925, when Turkey and the Soviet Union stopped fighting about it, Turkey guarantees the autonomy of Ajaria. And if the Georgians are committing suicide, Turkey will come in and take it. And if you take a look at the Turkish maps that they published recently, guess what? Ajaria is colored in the same color as the rest of Turkey. So you're going to lose Ajaria, you're going to lose Guria, you're going to lose the whole Black Sea. But that's not it, because the Russians now are going to come in and take Gori. They're going to take Kutaisi, create some connectivity. Georgia will cease to exist. Is that what you want, you little Georgian nationalist pukes? You want to destroy your country? You want how many casualties are you willing to take? You know, fortunately, in that 5-day war, you suffered about 150, 160 dead. That's tragic for the families of those who died. But compared to the 300,000 Ukrainians that have died in combat, that's a drop in the bucket. But now, if you want to go to war with Russia, open up that second front, give me a number. It's going to be big, guys. It's going to be really big. Now, it probably won't be any of the punks demonstrating, because those pro-American punks all have passports and they'll flee the country like cowards always do. So there will be a bunch of boys in the farmers' fields in Georgia right now doing the work. We're going to be called up and sent to die because of the stupidity of the idiots in Georgia who take the American dollars and don't want to admit it. See, that's why they're rejecting this law, because they don't want to have to say, oops, we're bought and paid for by the United States government. They don't want to admit to the Georgians that they don't care about Georgia. All they care about is enriching themselves with American dollars. They're corrupt as the day is long, and they're bad for Georgia. You're bad for Georgia. You know who's the friend of Georgia? Russia. Want to know why? Because Russia lives next door to Georgia. And for centuries, Russians and Georgians have learned to live peacefully with each other. Yes, there's been some problems. I'm not saying the Russian policy in Abkhazia is perfect. One only has to look at, Suslav's definition of what Abkhazia should be used to disrupt Georgian nationalism. One only has to look at the KGB creation of the Mountain Federation and take a look at what happened from 1992 to 1993 in Abkhazia to say the Russians ain't perfect. We know that. But that was Boris Yeltsin. That was then. Vladimir Putin inherited a situation, and he has dropped hint after hint after hint that there is the potential of a negotiated settlement, but Georgia cannot be a member of NATO. But Georgia continues to commit suicide by pretending they want to be a member of NATO. Georgia keeps saying they want to be part of the European Union. Draw the connectivity between the Europe and Georgia. Show me how that works, Georgia, on the little economic map. Can't. You know what I can do? Draw direct connectivity between Russia and you, especially in terms of energy pipelines, your rail network, the whole thing. Russia, just go look at Pushkin wrote about Georgia. Lermontov wrote about Georgia. Russian and Georgian cultures like this. They're your friends. They don't want to hurt you. All they ask is that you don't be part of a crescent of instability, that you don't buy into an American program designed to use your country to basically destabilize Russia. All the Russians ask you to do is be good neighbors. And if you're good neighbors with Russia, guess what? History shows they'll be good neighbors to you too. America won't. Hell, nobody here in my neighborhood, if I brought out a map and said, point Georgia on the map, hardly anybody could do it. Tell me something about Georgia. Nobody can do it. I'm throwing out names of places, Kutaisi, Abkhazia, I can talk about Svaneti. I can talk about Guria, Ajaria. I can say, Haketi. I can throw out all these things, and people are going to go, I don't know anything about that. I say that to a Russian and go, yeah, we got that. We got that. We know it. Russia knows Georgia. Russia lives next to Georgia. They've been friends with Georgia forever. We're not. We're using Georgia for our own selfish purposes. And when we're done with it, guess what, Georgia? You'll be flushed down the toilet of history, just like Ukraine is being flushed right now, just like the Afghans were flushed, just like the South Vietnamese were flushed, just like the Kurds were flushed. You're nothing to us. We don't like you. We don't care about you. We're going to use you. Then we're going to dump you. And if you don't realize that, I'm sorry, man. But you know what? Normally, I wouldn't get so emotionally involved in this, but this is my family. This is my wife. This is her family. This is their history. And you're just basically shitting all over it. And I've had it. I'm done with it. That's why I'm going to call you out, Georgia. I'm calling out to everybody in that square. Shame on you. That law should have passed, because then the whole world would know how you sold your soul for the American dollar. But you don't want to admit that. You're going to hide behind it in the name of democracy. Well, it ain't democracy when an outside power comes in and seizes control of your country. And that's what America's doing right now. Seizing control of your country.
Who is going to take responsibility for the Ukrainian people? Refugees, war widows, orphans? Will the U.S., European Union pay for their livelihood and compensation? What do you say, Scott?
What do I say?
2 question marks, not just one.
Let me put it this way. If it was left up to the European Union and the United States, all the Ukrainian women that have fled the country will become prostitutes because we don't care about them. All the children will become homeless in the streets, become drug addicts, drug dealers, and the scourge of society because we don't care about them. We will not help the Ukrainian people at all. Zero. Maybe there's Ukrainian communities around the world that can absorb some of them, bring them in, but the world is tired of Ukraine right now. We're exhausted by the Ukrainians, and the cost is too much. You know who's going to end up doing this? They don't want to, but they're going to have to do it. The Russians. The Russians, because the Russians are good people. They actually have a heart. They care. They have a soul. Now, I know a lot of Russians are sitting there going, no, we're not. You're full of shit, Ritter. We're not going to pay for this stuff. Yes, you are. You want to know why? Because you care about Ukraine. Because you care about the Ukrainian people. You always have and you always will. And at the end of the day, you are going to make sure that the nation that was part of the Soviet Union, that has the shared culture, the shared heritage, doesn't suffer. And so you're going to do what's necessary to help the Ukrainians back on their feet. And it's going to be painful. It's going to be expensive. It's going to hurt. But you're going to do it because you're good people. That's it. We're not good people. We don't care about the Ukrainians. I've said it. In Georgia, it's the same thing. We don't care about you. We could care less about you. We just don't. And we're going to screw you. We're going to dump you. And we're going to abandon you. Look at the people of Afghanistan. Remember, for 20 years, we said we cared about them. Do we care about them now? Do you know that every 2 hours, all those assholes, I'm sorry my language, man, but all those assholes, we got to go to war for the rights of Afghan women. You dumb shits. You don't care about Afghan women, because if you did, you know that every 2 hours an Afghan woman dies in childbirth. Do the numbers. Add it up. So you don't care about the Afghan women. You abandoned them. They're now in there. No one cares about them. We don't care about them. We're using Afghanistan as a tool to hurt the Taliban, which means we're using to hurt the Afghan people. We don't care about them at all. Zero. Nothing. And we don't care about the people of Ukraine either. We're going to abandon them to their fate, whatever that is. Just like we abandon our homeless, like we abandon all the disenfranchised people here at home. We don't give a shit about anybody. If you're not part of the system, if you're not part of that which generates income that helps the elite, we don't care about you. We discard you. So, you know who's going to step up? The goddamn Russians. They're going to do it. They don't want to do it. They shouldn't have to do it, but they're going to do it because they give a damn, because they care. I think Russian people actually go to bed at night worrying about this shit. We, on the other hand, we're worried about fantasy football. You know, are the NFL people going to be able to do X? I'm not making fun of the question. It was a good question. It's a fun question. But my point is, that's our level of excitement. But we don't lose any sleep over the fact that 20 million Ukrainians are homeless right now. Refugees in countries that don't want them, can't afford to keep them. We don't lose any sleep about that. You know, never mind.